Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to this electrifying episode of the Geek Garage Podcast. I am your host, as per usual, David. First of all, Ted is, he's absent today. He is taking this episode off to, I think, clean his garage. It doesn't fucking matter. He's got the day off, and I am joined by one of my good friends. He is a neighbor. He is a lover of all things, well, most things nerdy and geeky. So his role as guest on this podcast is definitely appropriate and well-deserved. He especially loves video games and comic books. He is a cybersecurity guru. His job is to hack people to find vulnerabilities. He works on another fucking level that I can only begin to comprehend. So please give it up for Christian. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm doing great, but out of that long intro, I was expecting you to say my last name, and it never came to be.
Christian Mougogiannis. That's how you say it, right?
Yes, yeah,
Mougogiannis.
sure, let's go with that.
I don't know why, and I'm even doing you're Greek, and I'm doing the
Right,
Italian hand
exactly.
thing. Mougogiannis. I don't know why. I mean,
Yeah, and
Greece
even if I was Italian, that would still be offensive.
Right, we're better than Italians. I don't know. I know.
Good.
Right, I know nothing about anything that happens overseas. I am so goddamn conceited and stuck in my own little world that I have no idea what's going on anywhere else. But yes, Christian, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. We are, of course, going to be talking about the near future of digital gaming and a lot of the things that it holds. We're going to talk about the Unreal Engine 5, the video and details that were just released. We're going to talk about a couple other games and stuff like that were just recently mentioned that they're going to be released. Going to be talking about the two major consoles that we're hopefully expecting this holiday season.
Yep.
And and then we're gonna wrap it up with our shit that doesn't suck segment as per usual. So I guess Christian, are you ready to just fucking dive right into it?
Well, let's do it. Since you talked about the new Unreal Engine, which is amply aimed 5, the video spoke for itself. They really went and redid the whole lighting situation where it both uses hardware and software to solve the whole ray tracing. And in history, ray tracing is very expensive. So usually most games, 99.9 games, unless you have an RTX GPU on a PC, is going to bake lighting in itself. So it's very fake and it's very static.
Right.
But as the demo showed, they could really adjust things at a whim, and it doesn't really have much of a CPU cost, and that's what made that bit amazing. But what truly got me excited was the way they handle all types of pixels. So if you notice the geometry, what's expensive is the more complex a mesh is, so the more detail any object has, the harder it is to render. So traditionally, you usually put a high quality asset, and then you had to dumb it down and lower the quality to get it to load properly and fast enough.
Right.
So now instead, what they did is they have tiny triangles being rendered at a pixel level. So it doesn't really render the mesh; it just analyzes it per triangle per pixel. And that basically means that you could put the most expensive asset, something that's so deeply scanned looks exactly like real life, and it won't really cost the GPU and the CPU much to render because the way that it's being rendered through the engine. And that's amazing, not just for the next consoles, but even existing hardware. For example, say that I had the engine today and I was in game development and I decided to make a new game. I could make a game look a lot better than what current AAA games look on the current consoles, and at the same time have it available for the PC and the next gen. And all I would have to tune is maybe some lighting, and other than that, it'll be the same assets, the same way that it renders, because the engine will handle all of that.
That's very, very interesting. For those of you that aren't kind of clued into what we're talking about, if you and you haven't seen this video, this demo video that was released just a couple days ago, pause the podcast, go just Google Unreal Engine 5, and I'm sure you'll see the YouTube video pretty quickly. It's about 9 or 10 minutes long, and they just demoed all this cool shit that they worked into this engine, and so you'll after that you'll kind of be up to speed with some of the things that we're talking about. One thing that I wanted to ask you about, Christian, that I
Hmm.
didn't, I'm no game developer. I'm not super clued into all the techie
Babble.
backgrounds. Right? Yeah. Why triangles? Like,
So basically, imagine you're trying to fake high quality.
uh huh.
So if you're going to take every uh, pixel, every bit of information, it's easier if you approximate it. And the
Okay.
trick is, how do you approximate it so that it still looks as good as the real thing? So it's easier to cut it down as a triangle than
Huh.
keep it as a pixel, which is basically a square, a very, very tiny square. So you're taking a fraction of a pixel of information and you're rendering that per pixel. So here's an example. Say that you want to render something that has, let's call it, uh, 10,000 bits of information for the verticals, or basically anything on the mesh. Uh,
Okay.
if you would take a picture from far away and then you blow it up, it'll look bad. So that's basically a low quality asset. If you go really deep in and you take a picture and you import that in, it's going to look too big and too expensive. By approximating it and taking it at the right angle, well, not angle, but taking a picture the right way, it you need a way of compressing that information, but at the same time you need it to look proper. So cutting it down to a triangle, you're cutting down the amount of information, but because you're doing it per pixel, even if you zoomed in enough, it'll still look amazing. So think of it like a way of compressing data without really compressing it.
Right. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. One thing that definitely caught my attention as far as like the holy shit factor, and like also things that I could kind of wrap my brain around,
Hmm.
was the like the, I think it's pronounced Quixel Megascan assets. They were saying that there's typically like the video game versions and cinematic versions
Hmm.
used
Hmm.
for, I don't know if they meant cinematic as in movies or cinematic as
So
in like the cutscenes from video games, but it sounded pretty impressive to my dum dum brain.
yeah, that's basically what they were explaining. Normally in game development, say that I wanted to, here I have a Fanta bottle in front of me. I
Hmm.
wanted to import this Fanta bottle in the game. I would take multiple high resolution pictures. Then I would go into a program and import those. And basically, imagine like you have a virtual clay and you clay it out, and then you would superimpose the picture on top of it,
Hmm.
and that'll look really good and high quality. But again, to use it in the game, it's very expensive to import this very good looking bottle. So by right now for games, what they would do is they would make a version that's for you to look up close, a version that looks really low quality that's for you to look for far away. And as you're walking up to the Fanta bottle, it'll change from a low resolution model to a higher one the closer you get. So that's why you get that asset swap and that
Right.
flicker when you're running fast, for example, and things are coming your way. They'll just flicker out of existence for a fraction of a second and swapped with a higher version of it. But if you don't have a high enough, fast enough drive, and of course the rendering power, it looks like a pop in and looks very poor. Uh,
Right.
Now with the new consoles, because both the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, we need to abbreviate that better, but they both have NVMe storage. So the amount of reads and writes is phenomenally faster than a hard drive.
Hmm.
And I usually when people go from a hard drive to a solid state drive, they say, "Oh my God, the leap is so gigantic." But when we're jumping now from on a console era from a hard drive to an NVMe solid state, which the NVMe solid state is by itself without any tweaking about 6 to 12 times faster. And
Wow.
and when it comes to the PlayStation 5, they've taken it a step up and actually made it really the best creme de la creme of NVMe drives. And on the Xbox side, they're pretty close in reads and writes. We don't have file numbers, but from the information that we have, they are very close.
Hmm.
But the Xbox is still below it. But what the Xbox has is the ability to add additional storage, something that the PlayStation 5 doesn't have on the
Right.
NVMe side. You can
Right.
put a regular hard drive on a USB and it'll work, but you don't want that for games. You just, maybe for cold storage, but that's about it.
Yeah.
So they both have a cool piece of technology and just taken a different way. And to go a little bit more in depth, what's even better on the PlayStation 5 is the amount of PCI lanes that it's using to give direct access to the solid state to the CPU is they're more than on the Xbox side. So that's why it has a little bit more of an advantage. But what that means for layman's terms and gaming, honestly, the PlayStation 5 loading times are going to be very slightly better than the
Hmm.
Xbox Series X,
Okay.
but not as big as it would be from a previous generation. Like you're gonna
Yeah.
go from a 12-second load time to a 2 second, and the best part is it's not even the speed that's important. It's the way that it allows developers to now rethink the way that they plan levels. Because right now they have to do it in a very linear way and in a very asset swap state. And to make matters worse, is because the hard drive and the platters on the hard drive, uh, the way that the pins move within the platters to find data is slow. And more importantly, the further away the data is from where the pins are currently at, it makes load times even worse. So, what game developers have been doing is kind of cheating the system
Uh-huh.
by say that you have, and I'm making up numbers now, say that you have 50 gigabytes worth of uh, data that you wanted to find. In reality, out of that 50, you only need about 5 to 10. But they copy the assets over and over again to this one large file. That
Right.
in the hopes that wherever the drive is, what it's seeking at is going to be closer to that repeating asset, so that you could load it slightly faster. See, stuff like that no longer has to happen. So
So
on the
it
NVMe.
it sounds like you're a fucking game developer from the amount of knowledge that you have, like considering you're actually in cybersecurity. Have you done
I
any
like
game development that
I like
I
hardware. That's all. When I
okay.
like something, I research the ish out of it.
Yeah, well, that was clear to me before tonight, but yeah. So we'll definitely get to whenever we approach talking about the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. We'll go into a little bit more detail. But is there anything else that you want to touch on with the Unreal 5
Yeah.
Unreal Engine 5 before
So
we kind of push forward?
two things. Number one,
Okay.
I want to play the game they were showing.
Yeah, it kind of looked like Tomb Raider. Like,
I mean, it's a tech demo, so it's not a real game.
right,
But
yeah.
at
It
the
looked
same time,
beautiful.
it did. It absolutely did. But even if it was that, it was a game slice. So even if they were going to make it into a game, they would have only made this specific slice that we saw. But that
Right.
slice, I'd like to play it over and over again, especially when she's running around and jumping through buildings and seeing the transition
Oh
being
my
so
god.
smooth.
Like I'm
That
getting goosebumps right now just like thinking about it. And like the part where she was squeezing in between the two
hmm
rock walls that were really close, like and it got really
yeah.
close. I
You
could
know
tell
what was cool
that
about that?
do
Sorry,
what?
finish on, and then I'll tell you what was cool about that scene.
So first I could kind of understand what they were talking about with the asset distribution where things get better looking to the objects that need to be better looking, and two, like, it looked fucking real, like
Hmm. Hmm.
it was so close to looking like real life. I was like, it's on a whole nother level, that I've never seen before, and it made me. I think this is the first time I've ever wanted to buy a brand new console when it comes out. Like, usually I'm like,
Yeah, day one.
yeah, let the other people get it, and I'll pick up the console 6 months or
Oh,
9 months later. But this is like just this
can I
small
burst your bubble
demo.
now?
Sure.
So the engine comes out next year, and
Yes, I did see that.
means is that AAA development tends to be about 4 to 6 years.
Mhm.
So we're not going to see a AAA game using that engine for a
Right.
long time.
Yeah,
Now,
I'm cool with that. I mean, I got time.
yeah, yeah.
I and like I said, I typically pick up consoles and games a little bit later, due to different issues. But yeah,
and and and
that's
and
cool with
and I'm
me.
the opposite of that. I will
Right,
bribe and murder anybody in order to get a day in advance. I'm
right.
one of the crazy people you would see. I mean, funny story. So, more than a few consoles, I had a police escort to bring me in so I could pick them up first. And that was back in New York when I actually knew people. Uh,
So you requested a police escort?
No, no.
Uh,
So here's okay. I'll give you an example of the Xbox 360.
okay.
On the Xbox 360, just like on the PS3, people were sleeping weeks in advance outside of Best Buys.
Right, right.
Meanwhile, I had a friend well, a market manager from Best Buy that guaranteed me the first Xbox 360 sold.
Okay.
And at the same time, because everybody was waiting and I was not waiting in line, I literally just walked up 2 minutes before they opened the store, went first in, and they
Uh,
knew that
how
people
how
would lose
pissed were those people?
Absolutely, I'd be pissed too. They had every right to be pissed.
Right.
Luckily, my friend was smart enough in advance to have a police escort take me to the front, pick it up, pay for it, and to my car.
So you
Uh,
don't get knifed in the process.
exactly. Although what's funny is that people were yelling, "I'll pay you double for it." And
What?
if I was smart, I would have sold, but no, no, I'm too much of a gamer to do that. In fact, when the PS3 was early on, the fat PS3
Mhm.
was going for crazy for thousands of dollars online. I had one, and again, one of the first ones in similar story, but this time it wasn't Best Buy. I took it home, and my wife, which was my girlfriend at the time, was saying, "You're gonna sell it, right?" And for the first time in my life, I maybe took 5 minutes to think about it,
Uh-huh.
and of course, I opened it and played it.
Of course.
Yeah, but 5 minutes, I had my doubts, but no.
Yeah. I don't know if this is how it worked for that line at Best Buy, but when the Wii was about to be released, I
Mhm,
was working at Target at the time. I was
mhm.
working back in the Food Avenue place, right across from Starbucks, where they serve like the pretzels and the shitty hot dogs and all that crappy food. Um, but people started lining up, I think, on Monday for the console to be released on Friday,
Mhm.
and they were quote unquote nice enough to give out tickets because they took an inventory
Okay.
of how many consoles they would have in stock come Friday, and they gave that amount of tickets out to people that were standing in line. That way
Mhm.
the people, like, say, that lined up on Tuesday, um, that they were already too late, that there was too many people in front of
Yeah,
them
yeah,
to that they weren't going to get a console. They would know that they wouldn't have
and
to
not
waste
waste
their
their
time.
time,
Yeah.
exactly. That's nice.
Do But those people that did get a ticket, they still had to wait in line. Of they couldn't like go home and then come back on Friday.
Hmm.
Do you know if that's how it was working at that Best Buy, or was it
No,
like a
no,
true first
no.
come
It
first
was
serve?
true. There was people camping out there for over a
Crazy.
week,
Ugh.
and it
Yeah, I
wasn't just
couldn't.
that Best Buy. Basically, everywhere in New York.
Uh huh.
And so, speaking of the Wii, I think my favorite story, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but
Okay.
my favorite story was actually picking up the Wii. Day one in Times Square, the very first Wii that was released. That's where they gave it. Unfortunately, I wasn't the first, but I have an excellent story, and I'm happy not to be the first. So, uh, just like always, there were people lining up in advance, and Toys R Us in Times Square was a big deal.
Uh
They
huh.
had actually closed all of Times Square for this event,
Right.
and a block in New York, in Manhattan, is not your average block. We're talking about 6 or 7 normal blocks. That's a single block there,
Right.
and there were the line was going basically a good 4 or 5 New York blocks all the way around
Wow.
to come back in. And I didn't go days in advance on that one, but at the same time they didn't let people stay days in advance.
Hmm.
So the day of, I told my wife, "Hey, honey, do you want to come with me? I'm gonna go to Times Square. You're more than welcome to go check out the stores or whatever. I'll be in line." And she's like, "Nope, I'm not coming." I'm like, "Okay, that's so I went there. Ended up, instead of going in the morning, I went maybe 4 hours early, and I saw two lines. One line being the line that ended up being that gigantic line, and another line that was for basically news article people that worked in the business that had some
Mm.
either show. For example, Olivia Munn's people were there,
Okay.
uh, and I saw the opportunity, being the social engineering guy that I am, to
Hmm.
jump onto that line.
Sure. Why
And
not?
I was waiting in line literally with a bunch of people from G4 TV, and they were all saying, "Oh, where are you from?" And one of them asked me directly, "Hey, what publication I'm with?" And I said fkthat.com, which is a domain I own. So I quickly, from my phone, put a bullshit page up that I already had
Oh
a
my
few
god.
themes up and running. It's just that the index.html file was renamed, so I just went
Sure.
in on the FTP, and I quickly renamed in one of the standard vanilla ones. So if they would check it, it was there, but not that they did. But
Right.
we were talking, and we started talking about how Olivia Munn licked the PS3, and in general licks the console live. And well, all joking, I was messing around with her, and she's like, "Well, uh, if you do get a Wii today, I'll lick it for you."
What is the deal with like licking stuff? Because like when the Nintendo Switch came out, that was the
Uh-huh.
thing. Like people licking the
I,
cartridges. They
I
were
don't
like,
know. I don't
"Don't
know
lick the
about people licking,
cartridges."
but
Yeah.
Olivia Munn is a very beautiful woman, and if she
Uh
asks
huh.
to lick my console, I am not gonna say no to that.
Olivia Munn, is that a euphemism? No, it's not. All right, I'm still on board.
Let's do it. No, but here's the interesting part. So yeah, I'm in line, but eventually, people would have to check my credentials.
Hmm.
So it's going to be a little bit hard for me to describe without using my hands, because I'm a very visual
Animated.
person.
Yeah.
Yes, but imagine if the there's the two lines that now have broken apart. One is for the regular people waiting in line to buy, and the other one being for news people. And
I'm assuming that the line for news people was exponentially shorter.
there were 12 people there, and I was
Okay.
like maybe fourth in line.
Okay. So yeah.
And the news people are let in hours in advance, and not only
Right.
that, but well, I'm not going to ruin the story, but more happened. So as the news line is moving in, the other line is static and won't move for hours,
Hmm.
and it goes into Toys R Us, and you would go into one door, and they would exit literally a door right next to it, And as the people in front of me went in the door, I just jumped to the other door as if I was exiting. And the key in New York, when you're doing any sort of shenanigan like that or social engineering, is put on an angry face and
Right.
just look annoyed that you're there, and people will leave you alone.
Because I mean, to them, you're just another New Yorker.
Yeah, luckily I like to be well dressed. So you see a well dressed New Yorker in an
Hmm.
area that the average person can't go, that people assume you're important,
Sure.
and you would see these big, guys that are there as security, literally just look at me and not do a thing because they assume that I'm there with a reason and they let me be.
Right.
And funny thing is, so I start walking, and here I am walking up to, and I'm gonna butcher his name, but the previous president of Nintendo, which at the time he wasn't the president, but Phil Zame, Phil's, yeah, I always butcher his name.
That's all
And
right.
yeah, and he's there with the father of Mario, and
What?
I'm literally standing between them, and inside I'm like, oh man, if only I had a power glove for him to sign, or like I'm like geeking out on the inside, and I'm like, oh, what do I have? On the outside, I look like an annoyed New Yorker that does not want to be there. And mind you, they at that point they had started the festivities, and they had live bands, and I was literally right next to the stage with the live bands. They had ladies from MTV with short skirts doing handstands in front of us,
Sure.
and this is all happening on the side,
Uh-huh.
so the average person couldn't even see it, but they could see the actual music playing and and the concert,
Hmm.
but they couldn't see the handstand portion and all the famous people. So somebody, maybe an hour in, tried to do the same thing that I did, and the
Okay.
security guards caught him so hard that I felt it.
Oh God.
Yes, yeah. So here I am now. I'm waiting, and at the same time, they asked us, "Hey, if you want to purchase, they're gonna have to let the first three people go in and buy first."
Hmm.
But after that, we could basically cut the line if we wanted to. And that's when my wife shows up, and she shows up on the opposite side, when the average person is.
Hmm.
And I'm like, well, okay, do I want to make my wife angry and stay here and be the third or fourth one to get it, or do I go with her and we sit in the line and hope they have enough copies? And ultimately, I went with my wife, and I waited in line. Took me a good 6 or 7 hours after
Oh
that
man.
to get it. But you know what? I got my copy. I ended up going home around 3 a.m. in the morning, and I basically,
Jesus.
being me, I got four controllers, including the Wiimote attachment that looks like a gamepad. I got
Right.
every game they had available. I went all out, and you know
Wow.
what? Uh, Olivia Munn didn't lick my Wii, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, we can't have everything, I guess.
I know, but I'll never forget it because, m- just like in security, your weakest link is the people that you talk to. Uh, if you look like you belong and you believe that you belong, then everybody else will too.
Right. So were they not willing to like let your wife like stand next to you, or would they
Well,
consider that like just another potential person that could
here's
buy a Wii?
here's what I thought is right now I'm there and I'm not supposed to be.
Uh
If I, made too much noise about bringing somebody
sure.
else in, they would say, "Yeah, who are you again?"
Yeah.
And that's what I was trying to avoid.
Gotcha. That
And
that makes sense.
ultimately, the people that I got to hang out with was, once in a lifetime, and I'll
Sure.
never forget it. And I,
It's cool how that shit works out, like, waiting in like, I've done my plenty of my fair share of waiting in line for
Mhm.
to buy stuff and to get inside concerts, um, and there's been, like, dozens of, like, friends and acquaintances that I've made over the last 10, 15, 20 years of doing that. And like you said, like those friendships are like priceless. And it's
Hmm.
just crazy how that shit works out sometimes like that, where
Yeah,
like you make friends in the oddest of places, but it totally makes sense. Like you're all gathered there because you're all obsessing
exactly.
over the same thing. Like you're all in love with, this video game console
Hmm.
or this band or this thing, whatever. And so it totally makes sense for you to like easily make
Yeah,
friends or
yeah.
strike up a conversation with people you don't know, like because you have things in common.
Hmm.
And so I find it like kind of fascinating, but also just very cool that things work out like that. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, pushing forward, just real quick, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2, there's not a whole lot to talk about, but I wanted to talk about it anyways. It's a thing. It's
Yeah.
going to be for PC. I think the article that I read, it's only going to be available on the Epic Games Store. And then
and and
sorry, go ahead.
just to add to that, Epic Game Store has been going out of their way and throwing their money to get as many exclusives as they can.
Yeah.
And it's, as a PC fan, I'm a lot of people hate that they're doing that. At the same
Hmm.
time, I understand why they're giving a bigger cut to the developers and they're trying to build their store. But at the same time, the software that runs their store is lacking at best. And
Sure.
what annoys me, while most people get angry at Epic, I get angry at Steam because they're not taking them seriously. And they
Mm,
really should.
sure.
They could have done a lot more than what they've done. But at the end of the day, the the market king is Steam, and
Right.
they're catching up. They're not there yet, but they're catching up, and those exclusives hurt people. But at the end of the
Yep.
day, I'm a sucker for getting something day one.
Uh-huh.
So unfortunately, the Epic Store has been getting my money.
Yeah, and I'm sure this will be another case because, I mean, like, it'll be available on PS4 and Xbox One, but I don't know a whole lot about PC gaming. I'm not
Mhm.
really tuned into that realm of gaming. I'm more of a console gamer, um, but yeah, I'm still kind of fascinated with like that competition that you just kind of elaborated on a little bit. It's I don't know. It's interesting how people. I mean, I guess it's similar to like exclusive titles
Mhm.
between Xbox or Microsoft and Sony. You know, I guess kind of akin to those battles, but
Mhm.
it's
Well,
fun
it
to hear about that because, like I said, I don't really pay too much attention to like
and it's
games that are available on PC or
mhm.
only available on PC.
So it's a long conversation, and really,
Yeah,
this
I
topic
bet.
requires its own
Hmm.
podcast. But uh, to keep things short, they're timed exclusives. So the people that want to get it on Steam, they have to wait between 6 months to a year for each game, which kind of sucks. And it's
Sure.
bad enough because before, PC was king. Games would come out on PC first, and bad ports would go to consoles. Now it's the opposite. Most games are only consoles, and the ones that come to the PC half the time are just bad ports, which is a shame. So
Right.
adding the Epic Store on top of things does not help.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah.
It's but yeah, Tony Hawk, I mean, I played, I can't remember if I ever played 1 and 2. I think I played them a little bit. I
Hmm.
But 3 was legit my jam. Like I played the shit out of that on, I think, PlayStation 2, 1 or
I know.
2, and then the N64, I want to say is what I really played Tony Hawk on.
I feel like I should stop talking to you, but I have so many reasons to stop talking to you. This is just, the tip of the
Why?
iceberg.
What
But
did I say now? I mean,
so, well, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 was king. They really took one, and on the second one they just improved it in all the right
sure.
ways.
Yeah,
After that, it just started going downhill.
right.
And the fact
I'm
they
not
said Nintendo 64 as well, that was the worst version of that game.
I'm not saying, I'm not shitting on 1 and 2 at all. Like
I
they're
know.
great games. I mean, that's why they're fucking remaking them.
Yeah,
But I was just it was just a personal anecdote that's where I
uh,
picked up when I first started playing Tony Hawk games. Um yeah, that and then it's as of right now, it's got a September 4th release date. As of right now, unless it gets pushed back for whatever reason. Um, but yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
So,
what?
as
Yeah,
far as the announcement, I'm sad to say that even though I played 1 and 2 a lot on the PlayStation 1,
hmm
uh, I I'm kind of, after all the iterations after that, that genre has died for me.
sure.
And so when I heard about the announcement, I felt sad because I didn't even go to actually hear or research anything about it. So I really don't know much from the announcement. Now, am I going to play them again? I will. It's
hmm
just one of those things where I'm more excited about if Star Citizen ever finishes than the announcement of Tony Hawk 1 and 2.
Right. Yeah, I totally get that. There's several things that pop up like that for me, like almost on a daily or weekly basis, that are like nerd or geek related, video game related, whatever, where like it's a revamp or a remake
Hmm.
or just a new title that people have been waiting for a really long time, and it's might not necessarily be something that I'm super interested in, but I
Hmm.
am, or maybe I am, but it's not something that I'm gonna go. I have a need to go grab right away, but I can like be happy for those people that they're really excited
Yeah,
about it.
yeah.
So I can definitely relate to that feeling where you're like it's a thing that's out there that's making a lot of people excited and happy, but it's not necessarily something that you are you know
Just right now,
creaming your shorts
yeah.
over.
Especially when I got the remake I always wanted, and I'm not gonna mention which game. We're gonna talk about it at the end.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, spoiler alert. They nailed it. So
hmm
after that, everything else is like, okay. I got my remake scratch itch done.
Right,
Uh,
right. Yeah. Um, but yeah, you were saying that you haven't done too much research on this remake or
yeah,
revamp, whatever.
correct.
That's fine, because basically everything that I said is what's known. Like there isn't like a
Hmm.
solid set in stone track list as far as the music goes, because that was always one of the biggest things with these games was
Hmm.
the music.
Yeah.
It was always like ska, punk rock, thrash metal,
Hmm.
really fun stuff that like you would like skaters skate to. And that's part of the reason that made these games so great and fun to play. But that's pretty much the I mean what I went over, like I said, is really what is known at this point.
Now,
Which
have they shown any video footage of the remake or anything like that?
I think they have, and from what I read, I didn't watch the video,
Okay.
but from what I read, there was music from the first two games that was being played during this video,
Okay.
the gameplay video or trailer. So I feel like we're kind of led to believe that some, if not all, of the original music that were in the first two games are going to be in this remake. So that's something to be potentially excited for.
And I know, leading to this announcement, more than a few skaters and bands actually
Mhm.
uh, on different podcasts or Twitter let it slip months in advance that they are going to be in the next Tony Hawk
Whoops.
game. Yeah, and it's funny how many of them did that, and it was like week after week. It was almost fake, but it wasn't. That's the funny part. And then they made this announcement, and I was like, okay, because at the time I was thinking to myself, well, it could be yet another Tony Hawk Pro Skater game, and let's face it, the last what 3 or 4 sucked,
Hmm.
and or they might actually nail it this time. So it was one of those things where I didn't want to get my hopes up, but at the same time, I had more important things to worry about gaming wise.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I think it still just hasn't hit me. Once I actually see the footage, I'm probably gonna get pumped up again.
Right. Yeah, that kind of sounds like the whole, I forget which Jonas brother it was. It was one of the Jonas brothers, that debacle between him and My Chemical Romance, where he accidentally spilled the beans about My Chemical Romance, like being in the recording studio and like practicing and getting back together in general.
Hmm.
And like my chem like spent so much time like making it crystal fucking clear that they were not getting back together, that they had no plans to. And like, and poor Nick Joe, whatever the fuck his name is,
Yeah, yeah,
the Jonas brother, he tweeted like, "Hey, like I just saw like members of My Chemical Romance practicing in the next studio over," and like no one, like half the people like wanted to believe him so bad, and others were like so pissed at him because
yeah, yeah.
like getting their hopes up, like knowing that they they had no plans on getting back together, but lo and behold, he wasn't fucking lying. Like they ended up getting back together. And
Which
if
was still a douche move, but yeah.
yeah, I mean, but man, I I gotta be honest. If I was like in a recording studio for
Mhm.
whatever reason, and I happen to see a couple, if not all, of the members of My Chemical Romance like practicing or playing music like the next door down, I'd be like, guess what's fucking happening in my life right now?
Yeah, the difference is though you haven't made tons and tons of money in that industry,
Yes, and I
and
have like
knowing how
4
hard
Twitter
it is.
followers.
Hey, I don't even have that. In fact, I have a Twitter account that I never use. I
Uh-huh.
only have it to follow other hackers because they kind of announce things there first.
Sure. Yeah,
So,
it's kind of like a Twitter version of a Finsta or whatever they call it.
but yeah, back onto on the gaming side.
Yeah, we
Uh,
can segue back to or get into
Stay on
PlayStation
topic.
5. Yeah. Yeah, we can do you want to talk about PlayStation
Yeah,
5 and
sure.
Xbox Series X congruently at the same time, like
Okay.
where we can
So
compare and contrast, or do you want to like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
hit
Well, I'm gonna start, and feel free to smack me with a virtual stick when you want me to either change lanes or slow down.
Sure.
Uh,
I mean,
yeah.
like, I could, we were talking a little bit
Mhm.
about this before we hit record, but I can definitely talk more to the PlayStation 5 specs. Maybe not
Okay.
like the super in detail tech specs, but like like the DualSense controller,
Well,
and, some of the other stuff, like I can definitely touch on.
okay. Do you want
So
to start on your end, and I'll start adding commentary and hopefully not go into a tangent.
yeah, yeah, that sounds good. So it seems like the projected release dates. I mean, there's no solid date
Yeah.
set in stone yet,
Hmm.
but the projected release date for both consoles for right now is just holiday 2020.
Yeah,
Um,
and more specifically, October
uh huh.
is what was early on leaked on
Right.
Sony side, and it's one of those things where there's a reason why we don't have a price and a set release date because the two companies are literally playing chicken. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
the,
That's exactly what's
yeah,
happening.
they're so Microsoft. So these both these companies are not poor companies.
Hmm.
We're talking about Sony. Last I checked, was worth what 100 and something billion, or
Sure.
130 billion, something like that.
Sounds right.
Yeah, and so they could definitely release a console and take a slight hit on a price, especially after the PlayStation 3 debacle, where they released the price tag that literally cost them the race. And Microsoft, on the other hand, is a $1.3 trillion company.
Right.
So they have a little bit more capital to kind of mess with Sony. So what they're trying to do right now is they're waiting to see what price tag Sony drops, and Microsoft is gonna basically try to beat it.
Hmm.
And the rumor is they're trying to beat it by $50 to $100. And they're this is a calculated cost because the most expensive part right now is the RAM,
Sure.
and especially with the new cell phones coming out with a DDR6 RAM, they're trying to yeah, it's not cheap right now to create anything electronic.
Right.
So Microsoft knows that their RAM is more shared and there's less of it than the PS5.
Hmm.
So they know automatically that the PS5 is going to be more expensive. Plus, Microsoft went with greater size to help dissipate the heat, while
Yeah.
the PlayStation 5, we don't know how it's going to look, but from the developer kits that have been leaked and from the proposed FCC uh, plans, it looks like it's going to be a lot smaller than the Xbox Series X.
Hmm.
So what that translates to is they had to go with a more expensive cooling unit to maintain that CPU from AMD, which is more or less identical on both consoles, but engineered and tweaked in different ways.
Hmm.
So Microsoft now knows, okay, well, they're paying more for RAM and they're paying more for the cooling unit. So it's not going to be a cheap console. They know how much theirs costs, and they have a good idea how much Sony's is going to cost, but they're just waiting for Sony to drop a price so they can beat it. And Sony's not dropping a price because they want to make sure that Microsoft doesn't have enough time to adjust theirs.
Right. Now, it seems maybe I'm just not paying enough attention, which is definitely like me. It's in my wheelhouse to just kind of glaze over the facts. But it my recollection is that the price points of the two consoles, like whenever they're first released, are
Mhm.
pretty similar historically speaking, like with PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, and then PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. It seemed like the price points were pretty similar for both
Well,
consoles, if not the same. Like, am I misremembering?
so on the PlayStation 3, the Xbox 360 was cheaper.
Okay.
Hardware wise, it was also inferior, but it didn't matter because it was at a price point that the average person could be okay with spending. Meanwhile, on the PlayStation side, the Sony side, it was $600. And
Right.
if memory serves, it was around 450 for the Xbox 360. So it
Okay.
was hard to justify. A
Yeah.
lesson that Microsoft didn't really learn until the Xbox One, where they were forcing people to get the Connect, and it was padding the price of the Xbox One by another $100. But clearly, pricing is extremely important because it cost Sony the PS3 era. They
Hmm.
as on PS2 they were kings, and then on PS3, they flat out lost. The majority of the people were on Microsoft side, and
Sure.
then things flipped again when Microsoft tried to on the Xbox 360, uh, not 360, the Xbox One, increase the price for the Kinect, and then not leak, but announce in advance that they're going to be going away with used games. That they wanted their online always DRM, which hurt them big time before release.
Right.
And during the actual release, they reneged that and they said they were not going to do it. But between the price and that, the damage was done.
Yeah.
And Sony then sealed the deal when they kept on developing in-house games, and Microsoft basically fired half the studios that they had, and the rest they didn't really release anything internal. Like outside Gears of War and Halo,
Hmm.
they really didn't have anything.
Right. Yeah,
So yeah, they right now Microsoft is being smart, and they're going to do their best to come ahead on this one. And traditionally, price and who comes out first tends to dictate the market. So right
right.
now, it's like the most expensive game of chicken in history.
um, right. Yeah, it's definitely shaping up to be like that. I mean, it's like we're not super close to Christmas time, but
Hmm.
it does creep up rather fast. So it's kind of interesting to see like the 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 few details that we do have, and the lack of any price points at this point in
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Which
It's
traditionally now we would actually have that information.
right, yeah. So I figured we could talk about the things about these two consoles that kind of have us excited. Uh,
Hmm.
I since I kind of have a little bit less to talk about. I'm sure you have quite a few. I'll kind of give my 2 cents
Okay.
first, real quick. Uh, I was really excited about the backwards compatibility feature
Hmm.
for PlayStation 5. For it looks like almost like 4,000 plus PS4 titles will be available for um, on the PlayStation 5. I don't know if that means that you can pop in a PS4 disc or if they'll only be available like via the
Yeah.
cloud or whatever.
So with that, that's the $1 million question. We know it's going to have backwards compatibility, but we're changing CPU architectures.
Hmm.
So, well, let me rephrase that. One of the reason why on the PS3 and PS4 you couldn't really do backwards compatibility was you were going from an IBM developed CPU, the octa-core, to an AMD one, which was more of a 686 based chip.
Hmm.
So you really couldn't emulate that unless you literally had the same thing that they did with the PS3 and PS2, where the original fat PS3 had the CPU and motherboard features all of the PS2, so it didn't emulate. It flat out hardware played everything.
Right.
Uh, and of course, that was changed later on with a slim model, and they went to a software emulation model. That's ancient history, and I'm not gonna go deep into that, but just wanted to put a little, asterisk
Sure.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
For sure.
on this time around, I'm curious to see if they go more of a hardware emulation or a software emulation.
Hmm.
Hardware is expensive, and the expensive usually goes towards the buyers.
Right.
So I don't know. We don't have that information,
Yeah.
and I kind of wish we did. But Sony hasn't put an asterisk anywhere saying only limited amount of games. It sounds like
Right.
everything will play. So I'm curious.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I mean, I'm definitely keeping my ear to the ground as far as the backwards compatibility factor goes with this. I'm interested to see what they
Hmm.
end up doing. The other thing, I mean, we talked a bunch about the the Unreal Engine thing that of course a lot
I
of
like
that
things.
yeah thing it's a very technical term,
The
and a lot of
thingamajig.
those you're right, that and like the ray tracing,
Hmm.
that all kind of ties in um to a little bit to what we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast. But just to reiterate, like reading about it, it's kind of like I said earlier, it a lot of it kind of goes over my head, but what I do understand, it's very interesting and incredible to,
Hmm.
to think about and see, when we have the visual examples like that demo
So
video.
speaking of ray tracing, now NVIDIA didn't invent ray tracing, but they definitely brought it to consumers in a package, an expensive package, but in their current gen GPUs. Now, what's interesting about ray tracing about on the next gen consoles, they're both boasting that they have it, but they have AMD CPU GPUs,
Hmm.
and AMD doesn't have actual ray tracing in the traditional sense of the word. Like you could do software on it, but not hardware because it doesn't have the dedicated cores for it. So it's interesting how we're, for the first time ever, we're seeing hardware from AMD that doesn't exist on the PC market actually find itself first on the console market, because right now the GPUs that AMD is making have their RDNA for that's RDNA 1.0, but the
Hmm.
consoles have RDNA 2.0, and that's basically giving us a peek on the GPUs that are going to be coming, and it looks like they are going to have ray tracing. On top of things, we know that the uh, well, the metric that they use for benchmarking the GPUs, the so-called teraflops, is it's kind of a fake number, and not
Okay.
that they're not giving us real numbers, but that entire metric is a marketing term.
Okay.
But if we were to believe that marketing talk, it's we're literally seeing the top end GPU from AMD. They're basically doubling its performance almost,
Wow.
uh, and it's interesting because AMD has been behind Nvidia when it comes to the GPU market. And when I say behind, very behind. They usually give you a good bang for your buck, but their top end GPU is a mediocre Nvidia GPU. And
Sure.
again, I'm paraphrasing. I can go into details on that, but that's again another
Yeah.
topic by itself.
Right, right, yeah. For people that might not be super aware of like what ray tracing is, I'll kind of sum it up in like a one or two sentence thing that kind of makes sense to me. And Christian, you can kind of like jump in and
Mhm.
elaborate if I fuck it up, or if you want to just elaborate further. So like the kind of gist that I got is like it simulates the way that like light moves in real life and how it can bounce off of various
Mhm.
surfaces. It's it also makes like certain elements in the game like water and glass and light reflection, a
Yeah.
character's hair, just look super realistic. Is that kind
So
of
you
in
you
the
you
realm?
nailed it on the light aspect because again, traditionally, getting light to look realistic and to bounce naturally is
Mhm.
very expensive.
Right.
And when you're looking at a game, when you're only most game engines only rendering what you see, and light is really bouncing on areas that you don't see and reflect backwards, it's difficult to fake that.
Mhm.
So on the NVIDIA side, what they've done is they've added these cores that um, basically do calculations specifically on ray tracing, so it allows the CPU and the GPU to worry about more important things. um, it even on the top end GPU from NVIDIA, the technology is not there to go full blown on it, but at the same time, if you wanted to mix that technology with what you're already doing, you can come out with some pretty realistic effects, and it wouldn't really cost you much performance. Uh,
Right.
Again, it's up to the developer to how they want to utilize the technology, but uh, there's games, for example, like the Battlefield game, where they went full blown. They wanted to have everything reflects, and even a building 5 blocks down from where you're shooting is still going to be reflecting light, and that made the game run very slowly for
Uh-huh.
an FPS when you had the ray tracing on full. But then there's other games like uh, Control, where it has a little more uh, less in depth, so the performance hit isn't as bad. So what I'm trying to say on the console side is that it all depends on the developer how they want to use the technology, but the
Right.
fact that it's going to be there, it is going to help make a more realistic game out of it.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like I said, I just wanted to bring that up because it was something that I was personally excited about. The
Mhm.
last thing I kind of wanted to touch on as far as PlayStation goes was the new oh my god.
The new
Ugh.
controller.
I have like five tongues in my mouth apparently. The Dual
Well,
Sense
that's an
controller.
accomplishment. Whose
I
turn is that now?
know. My wife's gonna be happy about that. Ew.
She'll be
Uh,
shh.
right. but yeah, like the it really seems like they are trying to find new ways to kind of immerse the player into the game, and I
Hmm.
like the route of the controller and doing it through the controller, like
Like the
having the
vibration
yeah, right,
technology they're
yeah,
using.
right, the different vibration technology,
Hmm.
like you said, the haptic feedback with
Yeah,
the L2 and R2 buttons. I think one of the examples they used on the website was like when you pull back like a bow, or an arrow on a bow and
hmm,
arrow, it's supposed to give you like a feeling, a tension sensation when you hold down the buttons,
yeah.
and it really like it makes me want to. I was doing like I was flexing my fingers like as I was reading. I was like, I want to feel what that feels like. I want to
and,
know. I want to know what it feels
and
like.
that's the interesting part about that.
Right.
So right now, yeah, we know about this new technology, and haptic feedback is not something that's new to cell phones, for example.
Sure.
But at the same time, you don't really know how that's going to feel until you have that controller and you play that game that properly utilizes it. So
Exactly.
this could be groundbreaking, or it could be another Nintendo Switch high definition vibration gimmick where there's going to be three games that used it and then everybody else is
Mhm.
not going to care about it, and then the
Right.
the light version of the Switch doesn't even have it.
Right.
It's,
Yeah.
yeah, you don't know where it's going to go. I'm hopeful and I think it's going to be great, but I have no fact to base it on. It's just, feeling.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much all I had between PlayStation and Xbox. Like I said,
How
I
dare
do,
you?
I know,
How dare you?
hey,
We're not going
so
to talk about the CPU, the GPU, the new technologies, the
hey,
differences between the two.
like I said, I'm going to touch on a few things that I was personally excited for, and then boot it to you because you are the tech person who can speak more uh,
All right.
elaborately and cohesively to the more nitty gritty tech specs
I don't
of
know about
the two.
cohesively, but I will definitely do a memory dump.
Hey, I
And
mean it when you talk it sounds good to me. I mean, I believe you.
so I'm a hardware guy, and
Right.
ultimately, whatever has the best specs tends to be my go-to. And mind you, for the people that don't know me, I will buy every console, every variation of every console. I am a collector, and yes, I'm that guy.
Uh,
But at the same time, um, I always play the game at on the highest spec machine that's available. For
right.
example, if it's a console only game, then I will go with a console that has the best specs. If it's a console and PC game, then of course I'm going to go with PC,
Mhm.
unless it's a scenario of uh, of a bad port, or a game like, for example, Monster Hunter was announced on the PC, but it was almost a year later that the PC would get it. At that point, FOMO gets me, and I'm day one on the console.
Right.
But TLDR, before I go into details, as of right now, when it comes to specs, the Xbox wins.
Yeah, if I had if you said David, what do you think is the front runner? I would have picked Xbox because it seems like historically and especially now the Xbox is focusing on the hardware and the really techie nitty gritty little small detail side of
Now,
things. So
and now, again, before I get lynched, there's many different reasons to buy a console. And even though specs wise, and when I say specs, I'll go a little bit deeper, the CPU can actually sustain higher clock speeds, and not just consistently higher, but it gives developers static levels that they could use it, and
mhm,
it'll dynamically adjust depending on what power it's given to the GPU, the CPU, and what utilization it's getting.
sure,
It can actually run on all cores at a higher clock than the PS5, but at the same time, the PS5 has a slightly faster NVMe drive. It has faster and more dedicated RAM. It has a technology which I personally, as an audiophile, looking forward to, a way of reshaping the way that audio is being delivered. It's supposed
Mhm.
to measure where your ear is and actually adjust how sound comes out from the speakers to hit you at the right level, which,
Oh.
quite frankly, I have no idea how they're going to make that work. But Mike Cerny when explained a bit about that tech, and I geeked out.
Yeah, that
Uh,
it
on the
sounds crazy.
Yeah, on the other side, at the end of the day, what most people buy a console for is who has the exclusives they're looking for
Mm,
and what console their friends are playing.
right.
Because nobody wants to be that guy that got the other console, or gal,
Yep.
that ultimately can't play with your friends. So I
I mean
know that. Mhm.
I'll admit that I bought an Xbox 360 strictly so I could play with my friends. Like
Yeah.
I was a casual gamer. I've always been a casual gamer. I've never been like super into gaming, and I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast before. But but like all my friends were playing Halo, ODST, um, and the Call of Duty that
Hmm.
was out at the
Yeah, you
time.
said duty.
And so I wanted to be part of like my friends like inner circle when they would do like either online parties or LAN parties. I was like, I want to be part of the thing. I want to play too. And so like I bought
You want
one
to play with their
strictly.
thing? Wow.
Yes, I know. I want to play with your Wii. And
With your Wii? Ooh.
right, and so I went out and I bought
Yeah.
one, but lo and behold, I had a fucking great time, playing those
Mhm.
games. I didn't play too many other games, but yeah, sorry, I just wanted to throw that out there, just
No,
as like a little
at the end of
anecdote.
the day, there's no wrong answer on what
Sure.
console works best for you.
Hmm.
I can only speak about myself, and I'm a hardware tech guy.
Yeah.
I'm usually the first person to gut that console, one of the first people to see what makes it tick,
Yeah.
ways I could bypass certain things. I'm not going to go into deep with that, but yeah, basically, when I own something, I like to make it do things that it's not meant to do.
Right.
So, uh, that being said, I'll have all consoles, and I can't wait for them to announce pricing so that I can actually start pre-ordering
Hmm.
the consoles. And unfortunately, now where we live, I don't have any ins of to get something, in advance, or to guarantee a copy until they announce and they allow some pre-orders. And hopefully, they're not going to sell out, which they are. Uh,
Right.
it's going to be a situation where I'm going to probably have to camp the computer, write a few scripts, and have a few VMs running, trying to catch one console per. Uh, but
Hmm.
yeah, it now, if you want, on the PS5 side, the CPU fundamentally is the same, but the
Hmm.
way that it utilizes itself is different. So on the PS5, they went a different route to where it'll try to overclock itself as high as it can, but it's a boost. It's not a base clock. So what happens with the boost is it cannot be sustained there for too long. Usually, for example, and this is kind of comparing apples to oranges, but on Intel, for example, their turbo boost technology has a time limit on it. So if you keep the CPU cool enough and you give it enough power, it will overclock certain cores higher. But when it hits this magic number, it'll, regardless of your temperature, regardless of the power that you're giving it, it will drop that boost clock. It cannot sustain it nonstop.
Right.
So on the console side, and this is again a little bit of a speculation, but Mike Cerny did say that the boost clock is going to boost itself up whenever it can, and what it'll try to do is it'll talk with the GPU and it'll see, hey, do for this frame that I'm now processing, do I need more CPU or GPU? And it'll downclock the GPU so it can push the CPU higher, and vice versa.
Hmm.
So it's interesting how they're doing that, and that could be the real difference right there. Because even though they can't hit the high clocks, the static high clocks that the Xbox One X can, sorry, I called it the Xbox One X. Oh god, the Xbox Series X. It still has the potential of hitting those peaks and that adjustability. So it really is up to the game developers to make something great out of that.
Right.
Uh, and the faster RAM and the larger RAM is important, especially for loading times and loading assets and having assets ready. And then the NVMe is fast enough that it really is as fast as RAM at this point, almost not there, but it's the speed difference is negligible when you're loading things. What's interesting, and I said that before, and I'll mention it again, is the way that developers now are going to develop levels is going to change dramatically. Uh,
Right.
that's the biggest generation leap there. And until we actually get some games and people see it, they really won't understand the impact that that has.
Hmm.
And from somebody that, for me, for example, uh, when I build computers, I go crazy builds. I make supercomputers whenever possible. And one of the standard things that I do is I get between 6 and 10 NVMe drives and run them in RAID 0. What that means is they run as one big drive, and
Okay.
ultimately the load time differences for the layman isn't that great, but for the amount of data that I move and utilize, it really makes a massive difference. And we're going to see some really cool things coming out in the console world.
Right on. Yeah. Uh, yeah, that's well, I understood some of those words.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry. Like I said, I can get off on a tangent. This is me giving you the quick version out of everything because I can
right.
talk for
No,
hours.
no. I like I said, um, it very much seems to me that, like I said a few minutes ago, that if you are more into the computing and the techie side of what makes consoles tick and what makes them run really well or just run in general, and maybe like customizing or whatever. I mean, it
Mhm.
seems like Xbox has historically been the way to go for that kind of person
I
because it's
wouldn't.
made by
I wouldn't say
Microsoft.
historically. If we look at it historically, let's look at the first Xbox. Microsoft sold it at a loss. They knew they wouldn't make any money out of it. They knew that
Mhm.
they would lose a ton of money, but they needed to be in the game for at least one generation to be taken
Right.
seriously.
Yeah.
Uh, e- Even though they jumped in late in that generation and it was more stronger than the PS2 at the time was the highest selling console ever
Oh,
up
oh
until that
yeah,
point.
it fucking dominated.
Yeah. And then on the Xbox 360, they're like, okay, we want to make a profit now, so we're not going to make the strongest machine that we can. In fact, up until Cliff Blazinski saw a dev unit, and Microsoft asked him, "What do you think about this unit?" He said, "It's going to suck unless you at least double the RAM," and they did, and the RAM was still not as good as the PS3.
Wow.
CPU wise, it wasn't as good. In fact, the Xbox 360 couldn't even do true 1080p. It was a butchered version of it.
Hmm.
So the PS3 was hands down the superior console in specs. But at the end of the day, the price hit him so hard that the Xbox started getting around, and the Xbox, and at the time Sony still had exclusives, but Microsoft had learned and had started stealing those exclusives from them or getting the timed exclusive situation. So, yeah, Microsoft won the war. They lost the first year. They won it. Well, I shouldn't say the first year, the first generation. They lost it the second generation. And then, sorry, they lost the first generation. They won it the second generation. And then on the third generation, which was the Xbox One, they lost it again.
Hmm.
So they they know what they have to do, and their current lead, Philip Spencer, he's a gamer.
Hmm.
He took a product which was the Xbox One, which, let's face it, was a complete and utter failure, and got it from having the worst rep to actually ending on a good note. The Xbox One X was hardware wise superior. The uh, the lack of exclusives they started fixing by buying more studios.
Hmm.
The they saw an opportunity to basically create the Xbox Game Pass, where at the time nothing else existed like it, so people could pay a monthly subscription and actually download games and play the full versions of them, not a cloud-based game, like a full-on game. At the same
Right.
time, he brought into the situation that said, okay, if you buy it from the Microsoft Store as a digital game, we'll give you the PC version and the Xbox versions for you to play. And that wasn't something that Sony could even do. So he took a bad situation and really ended it the best way possible, uh, because there was no winning that.
Mhm.
And he's smart enough now to know that this game of chicken is essential, and they're playing their cards right. I hate that they're doing it. I really do, but they really have to nail this one.
Right. Yeah. I was gonna ask you. I don't think this is a conversation that we've had before, but as far as console exclusives, I'm not sure if you're, where you sit as far as, if just in general, if you uh, dig console exclusives and kind of
So
pay attention to those. But I was curious to see where you sat on which side of the fence you sat on, whether you tend to lean towards Xbox exclusives or PlayStation.
so are you asking me if I like exclusives or if I prefer the exclusives of one company versus the other?
Sorry that I guess I shittily phrased that. The latter. Which console do you prefer as far as
So
exclusives
I
go?
I play every sort of game except sports games. I'd
Okay.
rather play those in real life than on game. But everything else I'm in, especially on the RPG side and more on the single player aspect.
Hmm.
And when it came to exclusives, Sony really nailed it in this
Hmm.
generation. I mean, we got so many amazing games. It's not even funny.
Yeah.
Uh, so it wasn't this generation wasn't really even a choice. Microsoft had two exclusives, and they happened to be two exclusives that I was burnt out already on.
Right.
So yeah, Sony absolutely captured my attention this generation. Now, next generation is the key. What's going to
Hmm.
happen? We know Sony's going to continue the single player route and multiplayer, but they've nailed it. The industry right now, well, up until recently, EA and all the big AAA companies were saying no, single player games are dead. People want uh, uh, online games only. People want, I'm forgetting my terms now, but play as a service type of games,
Right.
because ultimately that's what is making them tons of money. Loot
Hmm.
boxes and junk like that, which I absolutely hate. Uh, if you see the numbers, uh, EA alone on their worst quarter made billions and billions of dollars just on loot boxes alone. And I'm not talking about game sales. If you had to compare a game sale to the loot box from that game, we're talking about what, 50 times the return higher
Hmm.
on the loot boxes, which I hate. But at the same time, we're all falling for it. So I know I've paid for a few myself and I hate
Right.
myself for it. But it's, when they're seeing that kind of money, of course they're going to push the agenda towards there. And EA is one of the most hated companies on the planet. And
Yeah, people fucking hate those
yeah,
guys.
but guess what? They don't care as long as they make money. And that's
Hmm.
why I loved it when, well, now the previous CEO of Sony uh, was basically sitting down, and they had like uh, forget if it was where if it was just a streaming announcement or an actual physical one, so don't quote me on that, but they were taking jabs at other companies that don't do single player, and they were throwing the numbers of how well God of War did, how well Spider-Man did,
Hmm.
and just all the single player items that they had. So I'm happy. I want to see more of that. I want to play the next God of War. I want to play the next Spider-Man. There's a ton of games that I'm looking forward to. It's just, hardest part is waiting for them to come out.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I feel like that's a pretty good place to tie a bow on it, and and maybe reiterate some final thoughts if you have any before we move on to our shit that doesn't suck segment.
Sure. Well, I'm gonna end it with the Fry from Futurama meme saying, "Shut up and take my money."
That's a pretty good closing argument statement. Yeah, just shut up and take. I mean, I would say the same thing if I had money. Like, if I had it, I'd be like, yes, I'll take one of each, please and thank you. But I will be lucky if I can get a PS5 like 6 to
Well,
8 months down the road after its
listen, you
release.
can come and play my five.
Oh, thanks,
Ba-doom-tsh.
man. I appreciate that on your giant fucking screen that takes up an entire wall in your house. Um, yeah, that
I
that
like
that would
technology.
be
What can I say?
yeah, that would be pretty dope. All right, do you want to go first with our shit that doesn't suck?
Sure.
I already know your
So
game, but
yeah,
for our listeners,
I loved Final Fantasy VII, and at this point, it's almost a cliche of because so many people love that game.
sure.
So it was, and again, I know they use this in an advertisement, but it's the first time that I completely agreed with a marketing term. The most highly anticipated remake of all time,
Okay.
and it really is difficult to make a game justice. Um, After so long and waiting for so long, and the hype, the crazy amounts of hype we've had for this game to actually meet and exceed that bar is was almost impossible.
Hmm.
Yet I am very happy with the product that I played. I can't wait for the next part, and my the only thing I'm sad about is that they made an announcement that they're going to uh, now give us more than a few chapters because originally they were talking about three, then it was talked down to two. Now the toxin is they don't know how many chapters, and it could be, five or six for all I know.
Hmm.
But hey, I
Yeah.
can't wait for this to play the rest. I really enjoyed it. They nailed it, and
Right.
I just wish there was a PC port for it with higher resolution textures.
Yeah. Yeah, Final Fantasy, it's never been my jam. I've never been a huge fan of those kinds of games or
How
of
dare you? And
I
this is where
know.
we end the podcast. And I
Hey,
say good day. I
we're
say good day.
we're not ending it right here. Yeah, I don't RPGs just never really been
Yeah.
my jam. I'm definitely more of a first person shooter kind
Hmm.
of person.
And
But
again, there's
uh
nothing wrong with that.
Right, but like I said earlier in the podcast, like this is one of those things where I am super excited and glad that people are enjoying it. Just like with Animal Crossing and that whole
Hmm.
phenomenon and craziness that happened with, especially with it coming out right now, with the whole
They
quarantine
nailed the
thing.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, I know that didn't happen on purpose. It was
Of
just
course. Yeah.
a total accident, of course, because the game had been set for this due date for, I'm
Yeah.
sure
And
quite a while.
I mean, it's been delayed quite a bit.
Right.
So
Uh,
I was almost half expecting it to get delayed yet again, but I'm glad they didn't. And it
right.
saved me because both my kids play it too.
Yeah. But yeah,
But
I mean, I don't have a Switch yet. Whenever I do get one, I definitely plan on getting it, getting Animal Crossing. But I mean, just like I was saying, that was another instance of my feeling of joy that other people are getting
mhm.
out of playing this game or watching this movie or whatever. Like, I mean, because life it fucking sucks sometimes, and
Yeah,
you got to
but it
squeeze
rocks other
every
times.
yeah, and you got to squeeze whatever whatever you enjoyment you can out of it, and if it's a video game, then so be it. uh, but yeah, off of my soapbox, my shit that doesn't suck is it's not a super new title. It's within the last couple of years. Um but I beat Spider-Man for the PS4
Huzzah!
a while back, but my wife Lindsay and I, of course Lindsay, but for
Mhm.
listeners, we finally got around to purchasing the DLC, the extra
Okay.
stories, the story arcs that you can play, and we started playing the. I think the overarching theme, quote unquote, I guess, is the city that never sleeps, and then there's like 3 or 4 different stories that you can play, and the first one, just in the list, we just
Yeah.
picked that one, and it was the Black Cat storyline.
Yeah, that was
Um,
the first DLC they released.
yeah, and it's been a ton of fun. Holy shit, it's so fucking difficult. Like they I mean, like when I went back through, like, you can, once you beat the game, you can replay it from the start, but with all the goodies that
Hmm.
you snagged throughout your first go around. Well, like, it's so easy to replay with all those goodies and like just tear through fucking enemies like they're nothing. But when you play these DLCs, it's like they assume that you already beat the game, or they assume you're already at a certain like XP level or something.
Hmm.
And it's pretty damn difficult. It's taken Lindsay and I quite a few deaths to get through certain parts of the this first DLC. But holy shit, it's fun to revisit this game because we both loved it our first playthrough. And I mean, of course,
And
we're just
have
big
you finished
Spider-Man
all the
fans.
DLC?
Not yet. We're
Okay.
still playing. I think we're maybe like halfway to 2/3 of the way through it. I feel like, but
So here's what happened with my playthrough. So the game was out. I basically binged it. I played
mhm,
it nonstop, finished it, I enjoyed it. I had the season pass, but there's no DLCs were released yet. So I put it in the back burner, thinking, okay, no worries, I'll come back to it.
mhm.
And actually, last month, I went back to it,
Okay.
only to realize that the save game that I had that had beaten it was no longer there. And the last save that I had was basically at the point, again, I'm not going to give any spoilers in case somebody hasn't played it, but
Sure.
at the point where you're going to the prison and there's a prison break happening.
Oh no.
So I was like, God, I gotta redo all this stuff. And 5 minutes in, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm pausing this. I haven't gone back to it. So I haven't done the DLC yet, but I am gonna do it. It's just one of those things where I just had to,
Right. Well,
just
I
go do
mean,
it.
yeah, as far as I know, it'll always be there. So, I mean,
Yeah.
there's you can just pick it up whenever you want to. I
I'm
mean,
actually
that's
thinking on when the next gen comes around, maybe I'll
uh-huh.
do it then,
Sure.
just so I could,
As a
like,
refresher.
and not just that, like do a little fake reenactment on how they were showing loading times on that game on the next gen
Oh, okay.
console. It'd be interesting to see how fast that can go
Mm,
as Spider-Man. There's a limit to how fast you can go, but still,
right.
it'll be a great time to do it. Kind of like I'm doing the same thing for the Final Fantasy VII remake.
Hmm.
Once you reach the end, you unlock hard difficulty, and you can go play again, and your XP continues, your items continue, you get to select whatever chapters you want, more stuff unlocks, and it's all in all, I definitely want to go back and basically fully finish every little thing before the next chapter comes out. And
Right.
I told myself, well, if the new consoles come out by the end of this year, even if they get delayed a bit, I'm not going to see the next version of this game until at least a year from now, minimum.
Hmm.
Uh, so might as well just do all of that on the next gen console and kind of get the benefit of the added frame rate and whatever other goodies I get at the time.
Sure.
So at least that's the plan.
Yeah. Yeah, that totally makes sense. But yeah, I think that's a good place to kind of tie a bow on this episode. We're wrapping up right at our kind of expected runtime, which is absolutely perfect. So Christian, once again, thank you so much for, especially on such short notice, for coming on and uh, you know elaborating on all the things that I could, like I said, only like read and then regurgitate to my listeners.
It's all good. I was here naked and hiding away from my family, so you gave
Sure.
me a reason to talk.
Yeah, I mean, and I wouldn't expect anything different, honestly. In fact, I was hoping that you would be recording naked. And
Well, I'm always recording naked, but this is my first podcast.
well, I mean, that's another new thing in the books. It's another new thing you can add. Be like, hey, I did this today. I
Yeah.
recorded a podcast naked. I mean, how many other people can say that aside
Right?
from maybe like super niche podcasts where they're like, hey, we record this podcast naked. That's the name of the podcast.
Yeah, no animals hurt during the recording.
No animals were harmed during the
Yeah.
recording of this naked podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, thank you so much for coming on and
Happy to
dropping
be
some
here.
knowledge. I appreciate it. And please definitely come back again in the future for whatever topic
Yeah.
we
We
choose,
should
whether
talk about
it's
Brie Larson and
oh
Rian
my god,
Johnson.
we
Yes, and
we
I love
won't.
the sarcasm.
He said with heavy sarcasm.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll just have to steer clear of those topics unless it's
No, we
just a
should talk
giant
a
shit
lot about
fest.
them,
Right.
and I'll be more than happy to uh, plaster it all over their Twitter feeds.
Sure. All right. Well,
All
listeners,
right.
thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. As always, please take the time to subscribe to the podcast. We're pretty much everywhere podcasts are found: Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube. Go like and follow us on our social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We have a brand new Facebook group page as well as our regular Facebook page. The we of course still do a lot of updating and whatnot on the Facebook page, but like I said with the group, it is more structured to like a conversation kind of thing. Christian is in there quite a bit, trolling, as the kids say.
Hey,
I'll post like a poll or something like that.
you
Uh,
can call me a grammar Nazi. You can call me a detail oriented, but trolling, no.
no, you don't think so? All
I don't
right.
troll. I know what I like, and I know what I don't like. A troll would I'm delaying the ending, but a troll will get people to fight. I am
Sure.
usually the person fighting.
All right. Well, I mean, yeah. So maybe I misused the word troll or just didn't utilize the correct verbiage that would describe you. But yeah,
You
yeah.
can call me a
Whatever.
prick. That's fine too.
I mean, like there was one instance where one poll where I forgot to. I think it was the Star Wars one where
Yes.
I asked what I listed all three trilogies and said, "Hey, what's your favorite?" Because it was May the 4th, and I forgot to disable that feature with Facebook polls where users can add their own option and select more than one option because you can customize that. You can make those things not a thing with your poll. And I totally forgot to do that, but Facebook doesn't have the functionality where you can go back and like you can edit the verbiage in your post, but you can't edit the functionality of the poll itself unless you want to delete it and start all over. And by that point, people had already been voting and commenting, and I was just like, "Oh fuck it, I'll deal with the aftermath later. I'll
We'll do it live.
fuck it, we'll do it live." So yeah, all that to say, go search for the Facebook group page because that's where all the fun conversations go down, as far as polls and other fun conversations, stuff like that. So yeah, go hit us up on there and all the other social media. We appreciate you supporting us there. And if you like giving money to strangers, we also have a Patreon. All your money goes to upgrading equipments and funding trips to conventions and all that cool jazz. So know that we're not like taking your money and like spending it on crack whores and blow.
We're
So
not.
uh not today. uh
Okay.
maybe later. uh But yes, as of right now, your money goes to just making the show a better show. It's not going to replace your shitty host and co-host, but the audio quality will significantly improve over time. So there is that. But I have rambled for too long. Christian, like I said, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, listeners, thank you for listening. If you've made it this far, congratulations, and I'm sorry. And as always, be kind, stay geeky, and eat lots of cheesecake. Bye!